There are moments in life that sear themselves into your soul like invisible scars, moments that, no matter how many years pass, still ache when you touch them with your memory. For me, that moment arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in the living room of my own home, surrounded by people I thought I knew, but who turned out to be strangers, sharing my own blood. My name is Catherine Harrison, and I am 64 years old. What I am about to tell you will change the way you view your own family forever. Before I tell you what happened, I need you to understand who I was, who I had been for all those years. I was born in a small town in the Midwest where girls learned from a young age that family was the most sacred thing. My mother taught me how to sew, how to cook, how to care for others, but above all, she taught me to love unconditionally, and I did. I loved without measure, without questions, without limits. I married young. Richard was a hard-working man who dreamed of giving our children everything he never had. We lived together for 38 years. We weren't rich, but we never went without. We had a modest house in the suburbs, a backyard where I cultivated white roses, and 3 children who were our reason for existing. Andrew, my eldest, was born when I was 23. He was a serious boy, a child of few words, but with an intelligence everyone noticed. From a young age, he was ambitious. He wanted to be someone important. He went to law school on a scholarship, foregoing vacations and luxuries. Richard worked double shifts at the automotive plant. I took in sewing and alterations to help with the bills. It was all worth it when we saw him studying until dawn with that determination in his eyes. Later came Lucy and Thomas, 3 children, 3 different worlds. But Andrew was always special to me, not because I loved him more, but because I felt he needed my protection the most. He was the one who asked for hugs the least, the one who guarded his emotions like one guards dangerous secrets. When Andrew graduated, Richard wept with pride. I remember that day as if it were yesterday, my husband standing at the ceremony in his old but impeccable suit, applauding with hands calloused by hard labor. I wore a blue dress I had sewn especially for the occasion. We were happy with our simple happiness. Years passed. Andrew became a successful corporate attorney. He married Valerie, a woman from a wealthy family who never looked at me with true affection. I always felt that, to her, I was just the poor mother-in-law, the uneducated woman who didn't fit into her elegant cocktail parties. But I stayed silent. You learn to stay silent about many things when you love someone. Richard died 5 years ago, a sudden heart attack that didn't even give him time to say goodbye. That morning he had eaten breakfast with me, kissed my forehead as always, and by the afternoon, he was gone. The pain was so great I thought I wouldn't survive it, but I did, because that is what women like me do. We survive. After Richard's death, my life became quieter. Lucy had moved to Chicago for work. Thomas lived with his family in a nearby neighborhood and visited me every week. But Andrew distanced himself. His visits became sporadic. He always had an excuse: work, commitments, business trips. I lived alone in the same house where we had raised our children, a house that now felt too big for me, filled with photographs and memories. I continued tending the garden of white roses Richard had planted for me. Every flower that bloomed was like a love letter he was still sending me from wherever he was. Money was never abundant, but Richard had been prudent. He had a modest life insurance policy and some savings he had kept secret for years. When he died, I discovered he had left exactly $45,000 in an account I didn't know about. A fortune to us, a pittance to others. I invested that money wisely with the help of Thomas, who worked at a bank. I didn't touch a cent. I let it grow. It was my security, my peace of mind for the years I had left, and in the bottom of my heart, I also saw it as something I could divide among my 3 children when I was no longer here. A final inheritance from their father and me. Months turned into years. My life was quiet, almost monotonous. I went to church on Sundays, tended my garden, read novels I borrowed from the local library, and saw my grandchildren when their parents brought them over. They were my joy, my reason to keep smiling. Don't miss a single part of this story I'm sharing, because every piece carries a lesson I learned through tears. 6 months ago, everything changed. Andrew called me on a Friday night. His voice sounded different, excited in a strange way. He told me he had important news and would come to visit the next day. My heart filled with hope. It had been so long since we spent time together. He arrived on Saturday, accompanied by Valerie. They entered my house with a solemnity that unsettled me. We sat in the living room, that modest room with furniture that was old but clean, with curtains I had sewn myself 20 years ago. Andrew didn't waste time. He told me that a distant uncle of Richard's, Uncle August, whom we had barely seen a couple of times in our lives, had passed away without children 3 weeks prior. In his will, to everyone's surprise, he had left a considerable fortune to Richard's family. Since Richard was gone, the inheritance passed directly to his descendants, Andrew, Lucy, and Thomas. "How much?" I asked, my voice trembling. Andrew looked at me intently. $32 million, Mom, divided among the three of us. The world stopped. $32 million. A figure I couldn't even imagine. A figure that transformed lives, opened doors, changed everything. But there's something else, Andrew continued with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Uncle August left a special clause. An additional $1 million outside the main division, designated specifically for you. My heart skipped a beat. For me? Why? Apparently, he met you on 2 occasions and was impressed by your character. The way Andrew said that last word made me feel uncomfortable, as if he found it absurd. Valerie, sitting beside him, smiled coldly. "How generous of him," she said in a tone that made it clear she thought otherwise. "The official reading of the will is next Friday," Andrew explained. "Uncle August's lawyer wants to hold a formal meeting with all the heirs. It will be at my house. I'll invite a few close people. A small celebration." I nodded, still trying to process the information. $1 million for me. A 64-year-old woman who had never had more than $1,000 in her checking account. "Are you okay, Mom?" Andrew asked, though his tone didn't sound genuinely concerned. "Yes, son. Just surprised." After they left, I sat in that living room for hours. I looked at the photographs on the walls. Richard and I on our wedding day. The children when they were small, at birthdays and Christmases. A whole life captured in old frames. Richard used to say that money was like water. It revealed the true shape of things. When there is little, everyone adapts. When there is too much, some drown. I didn't know then how prophetic that phrase would be. Friday arrived faster than I expected. I prepared with care. I wore a simple beige dress, the pearl earrings Richard had given me. I wanted to look dignified, not flashy. Thomas picked me up. We drove to Andrew's house in silence. When we arrived, there were several cars parked outside, expensive luxury cars gleaming under the afternoon sun. The house was full of people. I recognized some of Andrew's colleagues, Valerie's friends, people I had only seen in photos. Lucy had arrived from Chicago and hugged me tightly. "Are you nervous, Mom?" "A little," I admitted. The lawyer, an older man named Arthur Miller, asked for silence. We all gathered in the grand living room. On the coffee table lay a leather folder with the law firm's seal. "Good afternoon," he began with a professional voice. "We are here for the official reading of the last will and testament of Mr. August Harrison, who passed away on the 18th of last month. As the designated executor, I will proceed to read the main provisions." He spoke about legal aspects, taxes, procedures. Then, he got to the heart of the matter. Mr. August Harrison established that his entire estate, valued at $32 million, is to be divided equally among the 3 children of his nephew, Richard Harrison, Andrew Richard, Lucy Isabel, and Thomas Edward. Each will receive approximately $10.6 million after taxes. There was applause. "Congratulations." Valerie popped a bottle of champagne. "Additionally," the lawyer continued, raising his voice, "there is a special provision. Mr. August left an additional $1 million outside of this division, intended for Mrs. Catherine Harrison, widow, in recognition of her selflessness and dedication to the family." He handed me a sealed envelope. "This is a personal letter Mr. August wrote for you." Everyone looked at me. Thomas smiled proudly. Lucy had tears in her eyes. But when I sought Andrew's gaze, what I saw froze me. Rage barely contained behind a forced smile. I opened the envelope with trembling hands. The letter was brief. "Dear Catherine, I saw you twice in my life. The first time, nursing Richard when he was sick with a dedication that reminded me of my own mother. The second, speaking of your children with pride but without vanity. I recognized in you something the modern world forgets: quiet dignity. This money is a recognition of that dignity. Use it wisely. With respect, August. It should have been a beautiful moment, an unexpected blessing. But the way Andrew watched me from across the room told me this wasn't a gift. It was the start of a war. Because that night, when everyone had left and I was returning home with Thomas, my phone rang. It was Andrew. "Mom, we need to talk about that money. I'm coming to your house tomorrow. I have a proposal that will interest you." He hung up before I could answer. And in that moment, as I stared into the darkness through the car window, I knew something had irrevocably changed between my son and me, but I didn't yet know how deep the abyss opening beneath my feet really was. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand what that amount of money meant. $32 million. I repeated the words in a whisper, as if saying them could make them real, could make me comprehend them. Andrew had explained that the legal process would take a few weeks, that there were documents to sign, red tape to clear, but it was secure. The inheritance was real. The 3 siblings would each receive over $10 million after taxes and legal fees. Valerie had smiled the entire time with that perfect smile that had always seemed cold to me. She talked of trips, investments, a new house in the exclusive part of the city. Andrew listened to her, nodding, his eyes shining with an emotion I hadn't seen in him since he was a boy receiving his first toy at Christmas. I only thought of Richard, of how he would have handled this news. He was always a prudent man, down to earth. He probably would have said something like, "Money doesn't change who you are. It only reveals who you always were." The following days were strange. Andrew called me often to update me on the legal process. He spoke with a new energy, almost frantic. Lucy also called from Chicago, excited yet incredulous. Thomas came to visit, and we sat in the kitchen drinking coffee as we always did. "Mom, this is crazy," he told me, holding the mug with both hands. "I never thought something like this could happen to us." "Me neither, son. Me neither. You know what I'm going to do?" he continued, eyes bright. "I'm going to pay for the kids' college in advance. I'm going to buy Laura that house she always dreamed of, and I'm going to open the business I always wanted, a small, family-style restaurant like the one Grandpa had." I smiled. Thomas had always been the dreamer among my children, the one who inherited Richard's kind heart. "And you, Mom, don't worry about anything ever again. I'm going to make sure you never want for anything." I squeezed his hand. My good son, the son who continued to see me as his mother, not an obstacle. Andrew decided to organize a family meeting to celebrate. He called me on a Tuesday morning to let me know. "Mom, on Friday the lawyer will hand over the final documents. I want to have a gathering at my house. I'll invite Lucy, Thomas, a few close friends. It'll be an intimate celebration. Will you come?" "Of course, son. Nothing would make me happier than being with you in that moment." His voice sounded warm, affectionate. For an instant, I felt I was getting my son back, that the money would bring us closer instead of separating us. How wrong I was. Friday arrived. I prepared with care. I wore a simple but elegant beige dress I had bought years ago for a wedding. I did my hair carefully. I put on the pearl earrings Richard had given me for our 20th anniversary. I wanted to look good. I wanted Andrew to feel proud of his mother. Thomas picked me up at 5 p.m. We drove together to Andrew's house, a large residence in an upscale area I knew little about. When we arrived, there were several cars parked outside, expensive, shiny cars. "Looks like he invited more people than I thought," Thomas commented as he looked for a spot to park. We went in. The house was impressive. Marble floors, high ceilings, crystal chandeliers. Valerie welcomed us with her polite but distant smile. "Catherine, so good you made it. Come in, come in." Andrew is in the living room with the lawyer and some guests. The room was full. I recognized some of them. Andrew's colleagues, Valerie's friends, people I had seen in photos but never in person. Lucy had arrived and greeted me with a long hug. She looked tired from the trip, but happy. Andrew was standing next to an older man in a dark suit, the lawyer handling the case. On the coffee table lay a leather binder with documents. "Mom." Andrew approached and kissed my cheek. "I'm glad you're here. In a few minutes, we're going to make all this official." I sat on a sofa next to Lucy and Thomas. Valerie offered drinks. Some guests chatted quietly, expectant. There was a strange energy in the room, like electricity before a storm. The lawyer cleared his throat to get attention. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Arthur Miller, and I have been in charge of managing Mr. August Harrison's estate. As you all know, this is an uncommon but very fortunate situation for the heirs. He spoke for several minutes about legal aspects, taxes, procedures. I barely listened. My mind wandered. I looked at Andrew, so serious, so adult. I remembered the boy he had been, the boy who cried in secret when he failed a test, the boy who hugged me when he had nightmares. Now then, the lawyer continued, I will proceed to read the specific terms of the will and hand over the corresponding documents to each heir. He opened the binder, took out several papers, and began to read in a monotone, professional voice. Mr. August Harrison, being of sound mind, established that his entire estate, valued at $32,200,000, be divided equally among the 3 children of his nephew, Richard Harrison, deceased. Lucy squeezed my hand. Thomas smiled nervously. Andrew stood motionless, eyes fixed on the lawyer. The heirs are Andrew Richard Harrison, Lucy Isabel Harrison, and Thomas Edward Harrison. Each will receive the sum of $10,733,333. There was applause, laughter, hugs. Valerie popped a bottle of champagne. Guests congratulated Andrew effusively. It was a moment of pure joy. But then, the lawyer raised a hand asking for silence. There is one final clause I must read. A clause Mr. August specifically established. The noise ceased. Everyone looked at the lawyer with curiosity, and in that instant, my entire life was about to shatter into pieces. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and looked at the document again. His face had turned serious, professional, almost uncomfortable. The clause reads verbatim. It is my express will that Mrs. Catherine Harrison, widow, mother of the principal heirs, receive in recognition of her selflessness and family sacrifice the sum of $1 million to be delivered immediately and without conditions. The silence was absolute. I didn't understand at first. I heard the words, but didn't process them. $1 million for me. Why? I wasn't a direct heir. I didn't even know that distant uncle well. Lucy was the first to react. Mom, it's for you, she exclaimed with tears in her eyes, hugging me. Thomas also stood up, excited, with that broad smile that lit up his face. You deserve it, Mom. God knows you deserve it. But my eyes instinctively sought Andrew, and what I saw froze my blood. His face had transformed. The joy had vanished. His jaw was clenched tight. His eyes, those eyes I had known since he first opened them in this world, looked at me with something I had never seen before. Contained rage. Valerie, beside him, had gone pale. Her perfect smile had turned into a taut line. There must be a mistake, Andrew said with a controlled voice, addressing the lawyer. My mother was not part of my Uncle August's direct family. She has no legal right to that inheritance. The lawyer looked at him with professional calm. Mr. August was very clear in his instructions. He stated that he met Mrs. Catherine on 2 occasions and was deeply impressed by her character and family dedication. The clause is legal and binding. There is no room for appeal. But it's $1 million, Valerie intervened, no longer hiding her annoyance. That significantly reduces the share corresponding to each heir. The lawyer shook his head. No, ma'am. The $1 million for Mrs. Catherine was calculated apart from the total inheritance. The $32.2 million already accounts for that figure. The main heirs still receive exactly what was announced. I should have felt relief with that clarification, but I didn't, because the way Andrew was looking at me told me that something fundamental had just broken between us. I ask you, have you ever felt that suddenly you no longer recognize someone you love? Andrew walked over to me. His voice was soft, but there was something sharp underneath. Mom, I need to speak with you in private. He led me to a study at the end of the hall. He closed the door. For a few seconds, we just looked at each other. I was looking for my son in those eyes. He seemed to be looking for something very different. I won't accept the money, I said before he could speak. If it bothers you, if it makes you uncomfortable, I'll simply reject it. I don't need it. It's not about that, Mom, he replied, but his tone said otherwise. It's about it making no sense. You barely knew Uncle August. Why would he leave you $1 million? I don't know, son. I don't understand it either. Are you sure? His voice hardened. Are you completely sure there wasn't something else? Some relationship I don't know about? It took me several seconds to comprehend what he was insinuating. When I did, I felt as if I had been slapped. Are you asking me if I had something with your father's uncle? That is what you think of me? I just want to understand, Mom. $1 million isn't something left to a person out of simple courtesy. Tears began to burn my eyes, but I held them back. I wasn't going to cry. Not yet. Your father and I were faithful to each other for 38 years. Every day, every moment. And that you, my own son, could even think something different hurts me more than anything that has ever happened to me. Andrew ran his hands through his hair, frustrated. Sorry, Mom. I didn't mean. It's just that this is very strange. And that money changes things. What things does it change, Andrew? He didn't answer. We returned to the living room. The atmosphere had shifted. Guests whispered in hushed tones. Lucy and Thomas looked at me with concern. Valerie was talking to the lawyer in a corner. The rest of the evening was torture. I tried to act normally, but every glance from Andrew was like a knife. Every forced smile from Valerie was a reminder that I was not welcome in this world of abundance that was now opening for them. When Thomas finally drove me back home, it was already night. We drove in silence for a while until he spoke. Don't listen to him, Mom. He's confused. Money does weird things to people. I know, son, I know. But in my heart, I knew something deeper was happening, something the money had only unearthed, not created. That night, alone in my house, I looked at the garden of white roses under the moonlight. Richard used to say that the most beautiful roses grow in the hardest soil, that pain makes them stronger. I didn't know then that the real pain was only just beginning. Because 3 days later, Andrew appeared at my door with a proposal that would change everything forever. It was Monday morning. I was in the garden pruning the roses when I heard the car pull up in front of my house. I recognized the sound of the engine before I saw him. It was Andrew. He got out with a leather briefcase in hand. He was wearing a dark suit, as if coming from the office, but it was barely 9 a.m. Something wasn't right. Good morning, Mom. He greeted me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Good morning, son. Want coffee? Yes, please. We went into the kitchen. I made coffee like I always did in the old pot Richard had bought me 20 years ago. The aroma filled the kitchen, bringing memories of all the mornings we had shared at that same table. Andrew waited until I sat across from him. He took a long sip of coffee before speaking. Mom, I came to talk to you about the money. Son, I already told you I won't accept it if it bothers you. I can formally reject it. The lawyer said no. It's not about rejecting it, he interrupted me. It's about being smart with it. He pulled several documents from the briefcase and spread them on the table. I've been thinking about this a lot. $1 million is a lot of money, Mom, but it can also disappear quickly if not managed well. You don't have experience with investments, with taxes, with financial planning. Thomas can help me. He works at a bank and Thomas works at a small branch doing personal loans, Andrew said, with a tone bordering on disdain. This is another level, Mom. You need real experience, contacts, market knowledge. He pointed to the documents. That's why I prepared this. It's a fiduciary administration plan. Basically, you would give me legal power over the money, and I would invest it in your name. I'd guarantee you a monthly allowance of $3,000 so you can live comfortably. The rest would grow over time. It's the smartest move. I looked at the papers without fully understanding. You want me to hand over the money to you? Not hand it over to me, Mom. It's professional administration. I'm a lawyer. I have contacts with the best financial advisors in the country. I can turn that $1 million into 2, into 3. But I need to have legal control to move it fast when there are opportunities. Something in my stomach twisted uncomfortably. Son, I appreciate your concern, but I think I prefer to keep things simple. I can leave the money in a secure savings account. A savings account? Andrew let out a dry laugh. Mom, with current inflation, you'd lose purchasing power every year. It's throwing money in the trash. Then I'll look for an independent financial advisor who... And how will you know they're trustworthy? His voice rose in pitch. There are thousands of scammers out there waiting for people like you, people without experience, to take everything. At least with me, you know I'm your son, that I would never hurt you. The way he said those last words made me doubt. Because if he really believed that, why did he need to convince me with such vehemence? I need to think about it, Andrew. It's an important decision. His face hardened. There isn't much to think about, Mom. It's common sense. Unless... He stopped, staring at me. Unless you don't trust me. There it was, the perfect trap. If I said no, it meant I didn't trust my own son. If I said yes, I would be handing over total control of my future to someone who, for the first time in my life, made me feel afraid. Of course I trust you, son, but this isn't about trust. It's about, what then? He interrupted. You know what I think, Mom? I think Thomas already filled your head with his ideas. He's always been jealous. He's always wanted to be the favorite son. Andrew, that's not fair. Thomas only wants to control you. He wants you to reject my help so he can manage you himself. Don't you see it? I remained silent. My son was saying things I didn't recognize, poisoned words that didn't seem like his. He stood up abruptly. You know what, Mom? Forget it. I came to help you because I love you, because I worry about your future. But if you prefer to listen to Thomas, go ahead. Just don't come crying when you lose everything. Andrew, please, don't leave like this. I need to go to work. He gathered the documents with jerky movements. When you change your mind, call me. But don't take too long. Opportunities don't wait. He left without saying goodbye. I heard the car start and drive away. I sat in the kitchen with my cold cup of coffee, trying to understand what had just happened. Was I the one in the wrong? Was I being ungrateful by rejecting his help? Or was there something darker behind that proposal? I called Thomas that same afternoon and told him everything. Mom, don't sign anything, he told me with a serious voice. If Andrew really wanted to help you, he would recommend an independent advisor. He wouldn't ask for total power over your money. This isn't right. But he's my son, Thomas. Why would he want to hurt me? I don't know, Mom, but money changes people. Sometimes it reveals who they really are. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned in bed thinking of Andrew as a child, of all the nights I stayed awake caring for him when he was sick, of all the sacrifices Richard and I made to give him a better life. At what moment did I lose that child? Or perhaps he never existed, and I only saw what I wanted to see. A week passed without news from Andrew. He didn't call, didn't write. It was as if he had erased my existence from his life because I didn't do what he wanted. Lucy called me from Chicago, worried. Mom, Andrew called me. He told me you're being manipulated by Thomas, that you're becoming paranoid. What is happening? I explained everything to her. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I can't believe it, she whispered finally. Andrew is really doing this. I don't want to create division between you all. Honey, you are siblings, but something is very wrong, she completed. You are protecting what is yours. And you have every right. Her words gave me strength. I decided I wouldn't sign anything, that I would seek independent professional help, that I would make my own decisions. I didn't know then that Andrew had already made his, because 2 weeks later I received a certified letter that left me breathless. The letter arrived on a Wednesday. The mailman knocked on the door and asked me to sign the receipt. It was a large, official envelope with the letterhead of a law firm I didn't know. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were several legal documents. I read the first page once, then again and again. The words refused to make sense in my mind. It was a petition for conservatorship. Andrew, my son, was legally requesting that I be declared incompetent to handle my own affairs. He alleged that I suffered from age-related cognitive decline, that I had shown signs of paranoia and irrational behavior, and that I needed a legal guardian to administer my assets. He offered himself, of course, as that guardian. The letter included statements. One from Valerie, testifying that she had seen me confused and disoriented during the inheritance meeting. Another from a neighbor, claiming she had observed me talking to myself in the garden. There was even a note from a doctor I had never visited, suggesting that at my age it was common to develop memory and judgment problems. It was all a lie, all fabricated, but there it was on official paper with signatures and legal stamps. I sat on the living room sofa. The envelope fell from my hands. For the first time in 5 years since Richard's death, I cried uncontrollably. Not silent tears, not contained weeping. It was a deep sob that came from a place in the soul I didn't know existed. How had it come to this? How could the child who had grown in my womb, who had nursed at my breast, who had learned to walk holding my hands, do this to me? The money. It was all for the money. I don't know how long I spent like that, crying alone in that living room full of family photos that now seemed like cruel taunts, photos of birthdays, graduations, Christmases. In all of them, Andrew smiled. In all of them, I looked at him with maternal pride. What would you have done in my place? How do you fight against your own blood without destroying yourself in the process? The phone rang. It was Thomas. Mom, are you okay? I've been calling all morning. I couldn't answer. I just cried harder. I'm coming over, don't move. He arrived 20 minutes later. When I showed him the documents, his face transformed into something I had never seen. Pure fury. This is illegal. This is abuse. I'm going to talk to Andrew right now. No, son, please. I don't want more fighting. You don't want fighting? His voice cracked. Mom, he is trying to rob you, to take away your dignity, your freedom. We can't stay silent. But he's your brother. A brother doesn't do this. A stranger does this. An enemy does this. Thomas stayed with me the rest of the day. He called Lucy and explained the situation. She took the first available flight. By nightfall, my 2 younger children were with me in that living room, planning how to defend me from my eldest son. Lucy contacted a lawyer friend of hers, an honest man named Frank Sullivan, who agreed to review my case without charging up front. Mrs. Harrison, he told me when we met the next day, this petition is weak. There is no real evidence of cognitive decline. The statements are circumstantial at best, but it's going to be painful. It's going to be public. Are you prepared for that? I don't have a choice, do I? There are always choices. You could offer Andrew a settlement, give him a portion of the money in exchange for withdrawing the petition. No. The word left my mouth with a firmness that surprised even me. I am not going to reward him for trying to destroy me. I am not going to teach him that cruelty is rewarded. If he wants to fight, we will fight. But with the truth. Frank nodded with respect. Then we start with independent medical evaluations. We need to demonstrate your full mental capacity. We will also look for evidence that the statements against you were fabricated or manipulated. The following days were a whirlwind of medical appointments. Neurologists, psychologists, geriatricians, they all tested me. Questions about dates, memory, reasoning capacity. It was humiliating, at my age, to have to prove I wasn't crazy, that I could make my own decisions. But I passed every test with excellent results. The doctors even commented that my mental acuity was above average for my age. Your son has no case, Frank told me after reviewing the results. Any judge will see that this is a strategy to control your inheritance, not a genuine concern for your well-being. I should have felt relieved, but I only felt empty. One afternoon, while waiting in a doctor's office, I saw Andrew. He was there too, probably meeting with one of the professionals he had hired to support his case. Our eyes met in the hallway. There was a moment suspended in time where everything could have changed, where he could have come toward me, could have said, "Forgive me, Mom, I don't know what I was thinking." But he didn't. He looked away and kept walking as if I were a stranger. That night, alone in my house, I went to the room that had been Andrew's when he was a boy. I still kept some of his things, school trophies, photographs, an old baseball glove Richard had bought him. I took the glove in my hands. I remembered the day Richard taught him to catch the ball in the backyard. Andrew was 8. He missed again and again, but he didn't give up. He had that fierce determination I admired. Now he was using that same determination against me. "What did I do to you, son?" I whispered in the darkness of the empty room. "What did I do wrong for you to hate me like this?" There was no answer, only the silence of a house too big for a woman too alone. The date for the preliminary hearing was set for 3 weeks later. Frank prepared me carefully on what to expect, what to say, how to behave. The most important thing, he told me, is to stay calm. Andrew and his lawyers will try to provoke you, to make you appear emotional or unstable. Do not fall into the trap. And if I can't contain myself, if I see my son sitting there lying about me and I simply break down, then we will make sure that breakdown is seen for what it is. The pain of a betrayed mother, not the instability of a sick mind. The days before the hearing were the longest of my life. I didn't sleep. I barely ate. Lucy stayed with me, taking care of me as if our roles had reversed. Now she was the mother. "You're gonna be fine, Mom," she told me every night. "The truth always wins." I wanted to believe her, but I had learned that truth and justice do not always go hand in hand. That sometimes the one with more money, more connections, more power, is the one who wins regardless of who is right. And Andrew had more of all that than I did. The night before the hearing, I spent hours looking at family photos. I searched for a sign, a clue of when this transformation had begun. Was it when he married Valerie? Was it when he started making money? Or was it always there, hidden, waiting for the perfect opportunity to come out? Perhaps Richard had seen it. Perhaps that was why he was always harder on Andrew than on the other two. It wasn't cruelty. It was preparation. It was trying to temper a character he knew was weak. At 3 a.m., I finally fell asleep on the sofa. I dreamed of Richard. We were young again in our first house with baby Andrew in my arms. "Take care of him," Richard told me. "He's going to need you more than the others." "I will," I replied in the dream. "I always will." I woke up with tears on my face. Outside, it was already dawning. It was the day of the hearing. It was the day I would have to face my son in a court of law and prove to the world that I wasn't crazy, that the only madness was what money had done to him. The courtroom was cold, not just from the air conditioning humming constantly, but from that chill that places where people's fates are decided always have. Cream-colored walls, dark wood benches, and a smell of old paper and disinfectant. I arrived early with Frank, Lucy, and Thomas. We sat on the left side. I wore a simple navy blue dress, hair pulled back, no jewelry except my wedding ring. Frank had advised me to look dignified but not flashy. "We want the judge to see a common, honest woman, not someone fighting for money," he had explained. Andrew arrived 15 minutes later. He was accompanied by 2 lawyers in expensive suits and Valerie, who wore a tight black dress and very high heels. They sat on the right side. At no moment did he look at me, but I couldn't stop looking at him. I searched for my son in that man in the gray suit, perfectly pressed, with gold cufflinks, with that air of authority and confidence he had cultivated for years. I didn't find him. The judge entered. He was an older man with completely white hair, thick glasses, and an expression of weariness that spoke of decades seeing the worst of human nature. "Case number 4532, announced the clerk. Andrew Richard Harrison versus Catherine Harrison, petition for conservatorship due to alleged mental incapacity." The words resonated in the room like a sentence. Mental incapacity. My son was stating publicly, legally, that I was crazy. Andrew's lawyer, a thin man with a nasal voice, began his opening statement. He spoke of my age, of the natural risks of cognitive decline, of my son's genuine concern for my well-being. He used technical words, statistics, references to similar cases. Then he called his first witness, Valerie. She took the stand with that studied elegance she always had. She swore to tell the truth with her hand on the Bible and sat with her back perfectly straight. "Mrs. Harrison," the lawyer began, "can you describe your mother-in-law's behavior during the meeting on Friday the 19th? She was confused. Valerie replied with a soft voice, almost compassionate. She clearly didn't understand what was happening. We had to explain the inheritance to her several times, and when the lawyer read the clause about her share, she seemed disoriented, as if she couldn't process the information. A lie. I had understood everything perfectly, but she said it with such conviction it almost sounded true. "Have you noticed other signs of decline?" the lawyer continued. "Yes. Occasionally, she repeats the same stories as if she doesn't remember telling them before. She forgets names. My husband has commented that sometimes she calls him by his late father's name." Another lie. I had never confused Andrew with Richard. Frank stood up to cross-examine. "Mrs. Harrison, isn't it true that you have a conflict of interest in this case? If your husband obtains control over his mother's money, wouldn't you benefit directly?" Valerie smiled coldly. "My interest is only my mother-in-law's well-being. The money is irrelevant." "Irrelevant?" Frank raised an eyebrow. "Isn't it true that you and your husband are in the process of buying a property for $5 million and need additional liquidity to close the deal?" Andrew's lawyer stood up immediately. "Objection. Irrelevant to the case." The judge thought for a moment. Aloud. "Mr. Sullivan, stay on the central topic." Valerie stepped down from the stand with a smile of satisfaction. She had planted her lies and walked away unscathed. Then the neighbor testified, Mrs. Martha, an older woman who lived 3 houses down from mine. She swore she had seen me talking to myself in the garden on multiple occasions. When Frank questioned her, he discovered that this woman had received $2,000 from Andrew as charitable aid 2 weeks before the lawsuit. The coincidence was obvious, but the damage was already done. Finally, the doctor who had supposedly evaluated my mental state, a Dr. Ramirez, whom I had never seen in my life, explained that he had reviewed my medical history and, based on my age and third-party reports, considered a deeper evaluation of my decision-making capacity prudent. Dr. Ramirez, Frank asked during cross-examination, did you at any point personally examine Mrs. Catherine? No. But based on the documentation, so your opinion is based entirely on what others told you, correct? Remote evaluations are a common practice when, yes or no, doctor. Did you examine my client personally? No. Thank you. No further questions. After a recess, it was our turn. Frank called first the neurologist who had examined me the previous week, Dr. Mendez, a respected professional with 30 years of experience. What was your diagnosis after evaluating Mrs. Catherine? Frank asked. Mrs. Harrison shows cognitive function that is excellent for her age. Her tests regarding memory, logical reasoning, and decision-making capacity are all within or above the normal range. I found no evidence of significant mental decline. Any evidence of paranoia or irrational behavior? None. In fact, she showed a notable level of clarity when explaining her situation. Her concerns seemed completely rational given the circumstances. Andrew's lawyer tried to discredit him, suggesting he had been hired by us, but Dr. Mendez held his position with professional firmness. Then Thomas testified. He spoke of me with so much love, with such conviction, that I had to hold back tears. My mother is the most lucid and grounded person I know, he said. She took care of my father during his illness, managed the house, the finances, everything without help. This lawsuit isn't about her mental capacity, it's about money, and that is the saddest part of all. When it was Lucy's turn, her voice trembled, but didn't break. I have spoken with my mother by phone 3 times a week for the last 5 years. Every conversation is clear, coherent, full of wisdom. She advises me on my job, on my life. If she is mentally incapacitated, then what does that say about the rest of us? Finally, Frank called me. I walked to the stand with shaking legs. I swore to tell the truth, looking directly at Andrew. He kept his eyes fixed on his papers. Mrs. Harrison, Frank began gently, can you explain in your own words what is happening here? I took a deep breath. This was the moment, the opportunity to speak, to tell my truth. My son wants my money, I said clearly, and he is willing to destroy my reputation, to humiliate me publicly to get it. I am not crazy. I am not confused. I am hurt. Because the child I raised, the child I gave everything to, prefers to see me as a senile woman rather than his mother. Why do you think he is doing this? Money changes people? Or perhaps it just reveals who they always were. I don't know. But I know that the Andrew sitting there is not the son I knew. Or maybe he never existed, and I only saw what I wanted to see. Andrew's lawyer stood up to question me. Mrs. Harrison, isn't it true that you refused to accept your son's professional help regarding the administration of your inheritance? I refused to give him total control of my money. That is different. And doesn't it seem irrational to reject the help of a successful lawyer your own son in favor of? What exactly? Managing $1 million with no experience whatsoever? It is not irrational to protect what is mine. What is irrational is pretending that a son who wants to strip me of my autonomy is acting out of love. You are accusing your son of having bad intentions. I am telling the truth. And the truth is that if he really cared about me, we wouldn't be here. He would be at my house, drinking coffee in my kitchen, talking with me as mother and son, not dragging me to court to declare me incompetent. The lawyer asked me more questions, trying to make me look resentful, bitter, irrational. But I stayed calm. I answered clearly. And when he finally let me step down, I felt I had said everything I needed to say. The judge announced he would take a 2-week recess to review the evidence before issuing his ruling. We left the courthouse in silence. Outside, the sun shone with an intensity that seemed cruel after the hours in that cold, dark room. Lucy hugged me tight. You were incredible, Mom. Was I? I murmured. Because I don't feel incredible. I feel destroyed. Thomas had tears in his eyes. We're going to win this. The judge saw the truth. But as we walked toward the car, I saw Andrew and Valerie leaving through another door. He was talking on the phone, laughing at something, as if this were just another day at work, as if he hadn't just tried to destroy his own mother. That night, back in my house, I sat in the garden under the stars. The white roses shone under the moonlight. Richard used to say that the darkest nights produce the brightest stars. I needed to believe that. I needed to believe that out of all this darkness, some light could be born. But then my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered. "Mrs. Harrison?" said a woman's voice, trembling, scared. "My name is Patricia Ross. I was your son Andrew's secretary for 3 years. I need to speak with you about something I discovered. Something he doesn't want anyone to know." My heart started beating faster. "What did you discover?" "No, not over the phone. Can we meet tomorrow? It's important. It has to do with the inheritance. And with your late husband." The line cut off. I sat in the dark with the phone in my hand, trying to understand what Richard could have to do with all this. My husband had died 5 years ago. What secret could he still be keeping that affected the present? And more importantly, was I ready to discover it? Patricia Ross gave me the address of a small coffee shop downtown. She asked me to come alone, not to tell anyone about our meeting. Her voice on the phone had sounded frightened, almost desperate. I arrived at 10 a.m., as we had agreed. The coffee shop was almost empty. A young woman of about 35, with brown hair and a ponytail, signaled me from a back table. She had deep, dark circles under her eyes, and her hands shook around her coffee cup. "Mrs. Harrison," she whispered when I sat down. "Thank you for coming. What is this you need to tell me?" She looked around nervously before pulling a manila envelope from her bag. "I worked for Andrew for 3 years. I was his personal assistant. I managed his schedule, his documents, his calls, everything. 2 months ago, he fired me without explanation. He just told me he no longer needed my services. I'm very sorry, but I don't understand what that has to do with me." "It has everything to do with it." She opened the envelope and took out several documents. Before leaving, I made copies of some files that seemed strange to me. I didn't know what they meant then, but when I saw the news about the lawsuit he filed against you, I understood everything. She showed me the first document. It was correspondence between Andrew and Uncle August, dated 2 years ago. 2 years. 1 year before the uncle died. I read with disbelief. In the letter, Andrew proposed an agreement beneficial to both. If the uncle named him the principal heir of his fortune, Andrew would take charge of properly caring for the money and ensuring it was used wisely. But what froze me was the next line. "My father, your nephew Richard, unfortunately did not leave things in order before his death. My mother, though well-intentioned, lacks the capacity to handle complex financial affairs. It would be prudent if any provision for her were administered by someone more capable. Andrew was planning this 2 years ago. Before the uncle died, before there was even an inheritance." "There's more," Patricia said, showing me another document. "This is a life insurance policy on your husband, the one he left in your name." I looked at the paper. It was indeed Richard's life insurance, the $45,000 I had invested carefully. Look at the issue date. And look who processed it. The policy had been issued 3 months before Richard's death, and the agent who had processed it was a business associate of Andrew's. "I don't understand what you're trying to tell me." Patricia looked me directly in the eyes. "Mrs. Harrison, your husband didn't have that policy before. Andrew bought it in your father's name, without him knowing. He paid the premiums during those 3 months. And when your husband passed away suddenly, the world started to spin." I held onto the table to keep from falling. "Are you saying, my son?" "I'm not saying anything specific," she interrupted quickly. "I don't have proof of anything criminal regarding the death, but it's strange, don't you think? Buying a large life insurance policy for his father, a man who never believed in that kind of insurance, just 3 months before he died of a sudden heart attack. My husband had heart problems," I said with a weak voice, trying to find a rational explanation. "The doctor said the heart attack was natural." "I know, and it probably was. But your son bet on it. He knew his father had a weak heart. He knew he worked too hard, and he made sure that when the inevitable happened, there would be money. Money he expected to control." "Why are you telling me this?" Because he fired me when I started asking questions, and because I know what he is doing with the lawsuit, he made me write some of the false statements he presented in court. He forced me to lie. When I refused to keep doing it, he threatened me. He told me if I spoke, he would make sure I never worked in this city again. She took more papers out of the envelope. Here are the original drafts of the statements. You can see my handwriting, my corrections. This proves everything was fabricated, that the accusations against you are false. I took the documents with trembling hands. It was all true. There was written evidence of the manipulation, the lies, the complete plan. Why are you risking this to help me? Because I have a mother. And if someone did to her what Andrew is doing to you, I would hope someone would be brave enough to speak up. We sat in silence. I tried to process everything. My son had planned this for years. He had manipulated, lied. He had probably even wished for his own father's death to benefit from the insurance. And now he was destroying me because I was the last obstacle between him and total control of the money. What would you have done in my place? I whispered, more to myself than to Patricia. How does one face the monster their son has become without the pain killing her first? Patricia squeezed my hand. With the truth, always with the truth. I put the documents in my bag. I thanked her. I promised I would protect her when all this came to light. She hugged me before leaving, whispering good luck in my ear. I left the coffee shop in a state of shock. I walked aimlessly for several blocks, not really seeing anything around me. People passed, cars honked, life continued as if nothing had happened. But my world had been destroyed. Richard, my Richard, had died. Did he know? Did he die in peace? Or did he die with the suspicion that something wasn't right? And I had been so blind, so naive. How did I not see the signs? I called Frank from a park bench. I told him everything. There was a long silence on the other end. This changes everything, he said finally. With this evidence, we don't just win the conservatorship case. We could file charges for fraud, for falsification of documents, for— I don't want revenge, I interrupted him. I just want this to end. I want to be left alone. Catherine, with all due respect, this isn't just about you anymore. Your son committed several crimes. Patricia is a witness. The evidence is clear. This has to go to the authorities. I knew he was right, but the idea of seeing Andrew not just defeated in civil court, but potentially facing criminal charges, tore me apart. He was still my son. The boy I had carried in my womb. The baby I had nursed. The little one who cried when he had nightmares and only I could calm him. At what moment had that child turned into this? That afternoon, Thomas and Lucy came to my house. I showed them the documents. Lucy cried. Thomas went pale with fury. I'm going to kill him, he said, and immediately corrected himself. No, sorry, I didn't mean that. It's just— How could he? How could he do this to Dad? To you? The money, I replied with a tired voice. It was always about the money. No, said Lucy, wiping her tears. It's not just the money. It's power. It's control. It's wanting to be important regardless of who he has to destroy along the way. Frank filed the new documents with the judge urgently. He requested an immediate hearing. The judge, after reviewing the evidence, agreed. The hearing was scheduled for 2 days later. Those 48 hours were eternal. I barely slept. When I did, I dreamed of Richard. In the dreams, he tried to tell me something important, but I couldn't hear him. He drifted away, faded, and I was left alone screaming his name. On the day of the hearing, the room was fuller than the first time. Some journalists had arrived after information about the new evidence leaked. The case of a mother fighting against her greedy son was the kind of story that attracted attention. Andrew entered with his legal team. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. He knew something had changed. The judge called for order. I have reviewed the new evidence presented by the defense. It is deeply disturbing, Mr. Harrison. He looked directly at Andrew. Do you have anything to say before I make my decision? Andrew stood up. For a moment I thought he would apologize, that he would admit everything, that he would become my son again. But when he spoke, his voice was cold, calculating. Your Honor, those documents were obtained illegally by a disgruntled former employee. They have no legal validity. And as for the accusations regarding my father's life insurance policy, I was simply being prudent. There is nothing criminal about securing the family's future. The judge looked at him for a long moment. Then he shook his head. Mr. Harrison, in my 30 years on this bench, I have seen many things, but few as brazen as this. The petition for conservatorship is dismissed. Your mother is completely capable of handling her own affairs. Furthermore, I am ordering an official investigation into the irregularities presented. And I warn you, if I discover you have committed procedural fraud, you will face severe consequences. He banged the gavel. I had won. The legal nightmare was over. But when I looked at Andrew, I saw something in his face that filled me with terror. It wasn't defeat. It wasn't regret. It was pure hatred. And I knew in that instant that this was far from over. Because a son capable of destroying his mother in court is capable of anything. And that night, when I returned home to find the door forced open, my living room trashed, and a note on the table that said, "This is just the beginning," I knew the real battle was just starting. I called the police immediately. They arrived 20 minutes later, 2 officers who walked through my house with flashlights, taking photos and notes. The furniture was overturned, the sofa cushions slashed. The family photographs that had hung on the walls for decades lay broken on the floor, the glass shattered like my heart. But the worst was the garden. Someone had ripped up all my white roses, every single one. They had been left thrown on the dirt, wilting, dying. The garden Richard had planted for me, the last living piece of our love, destroyed. I sat on the front step while the police worked, unable to cry. I had no tears left. There was only a huge, cold void spreading inside me like a wound that would never close. "Mrs. Harrison," said one of the officers, approaching. "Do you have any idea who could have done this? Any enemies? Anyone with a reason to want to hurt you?" I looked at the note held in an evidence bag. This is just the beginning. The handwriting was impersonal, likely printed, but I knew who was behind it. "My son," I whispered. The officer looked uncomfortable. "Your son? Are you sure about that?" "We are in the middle of a legal battle. He just lost in court, and now this. Who else could it be?" "I understand, but without direct proof, without witnesses, it's difficult." "I know. He's a lawyer. He knows exactly how to do this without leaving evidence." The officers stayed another hour, took the note, fingerprints, promised to investigate, but their eyes told me what I already knew. Without concrete proof, there was nothing they could do. When they finally left, I called Thomas. He came running with his wife Laura and the kids. Lucy came too. Together we started cleaning, picking up the pieces, literally and figuratively. "You're going to stay with us," Thomas declared as he lifted a broken frame. "It's not safe for you to be here alone." "This is my home," I replied with a firmness I didn't feel. "I'm not going to let him drive me out of here too." "Mom, please." "No, Thomas. I've already lost too much. I'm not going to lose my home. It's the only thing I have left of your father." Lucy hugged me silently. She understood. She had always understood that sometimes the battle isn't just about winning, but about not losing the last thing that defines you. That night, after everyone left, I installed new locks on all the doors. I closed the curtains. I sat in the kitchen with a cup of tea I couldn't drink, listening to every noise in the house, every creak, every whisper of the wind. I was afraid, a deep, visceral fear I hadn't felt in my entire life, because it's one thing to face a stranger, a criminal. But how do you protect yourself from your own blood? How do you sleep knowing someone who came from your body wants to destroy you? The following days were a silent nightmare. Frank filed a formal complaint against Andrew for the break-in, but without direct evidence, it was just my word. Andrew denied everything. Of course, he claimed he had also been a victim of robberies recently, insinuating that perhaps I was fabricating evidence to discredit him. The investigation into the procedural fraud moved slowly. Authorities reviewed documents, interrogated Patricia, examined every detail. But these processes take time, months, maybe years. Meanwhile, I lived in a constant state of alert. Every unknown call made me jump. Every car that stopped in front of my house filled me with panic. I stopped going out except for essentials. The world had become a dangerous place where my own son lurked in the shadows. One afternoon, 2 weeks after the break-in, I received a call from Valerie. Her voice was sweet, almost concerned. "Catherine, it's me. I know things have been difficult. I wanted to know if you're okay." "Why are you calling me, Valerie?" "Because despite everything, you are my husband's mother, and I think all this has gotten out of hand. Andrew he's not well. He's obsessed with this. He barely sleeps, barely eats. And what do you want me to do about it? I want us to talk. You, me, and Andrew. As a family, maybe we can find a solution that works for everyone. No lawyers, no courts, just us. Every instinct told me no, that it was a trap, that Valerie had never been my friend and wouldn't start now. But there was a part of me, that maternal part, that never dies no matter how much you are hurt, that wanted to believe. Wanted to think there was still hope, that my son could come back to me. Where? I asked finally. At our house. This Saturday at 3 p.m. Just us three. I promise it will be civil. I accepted. Against Frank's advice, against Thomas and Lucy's worry, I agreed to go. Saturday arrived overcast, threatening a storm. I dressed carefully, like someone preparing for battle. I carried a small recorder in my purse that Frank had given me. Record everything, he had said. Trust nothing. I arrived at Andrew's house exactly at 3. Valerie welcomed me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The house was quiet, too quiet. Come in, please. Andrew is in the study waiting for you. I walked down that long hallway to the study. The door was ajar. I knocked softly before entering. Andrew was sitting behind his desk. He looked different, thinner, deep circles under his eyes, hair disheveled, as if he really hadn't slept in weeks. Hi, Mom, he said without getting up. Hi, son. We looked at each other in silence for a moment that seemed eternal. I searched his eyes for something. Anything that would tell me the boy I loved was still in there. Valerie says you wanted to talk, I said finally. Yes. I want this to end, Mom. I'm tired. You're tired. We're all tired. Then drop the hostility. Leave me alone, and it will all end. It's not that simple. An official investigation has already been opened. I can't stop it even if I wanted to. You could tell the truth. Admit what you did. He laughed humorlessly. The truth? What truth, Mom? That I worked my whole life to get out of the poverty we grew up in? That I sacrificed, studied, broke my back to be somebody? And now, when I finally have the chance to secure my future, to give my family what they deserve, you stand in my way? I didn't stand in the way of anything. You were the one who... You rejected my help. His voice rose. When I came to offer to manage your money, when I wanted to protect you, you rejected me. You made me look like a monster in front of Thomas and Lucy. I didn't want your protection. I wanted my freedom, my dignity. Dignity! He stood up, hands clenched on the desk. Do you know how many times as a kid I went to school with holes in my shoes because there was no money for new ones? How many times I heard other kids make fun of me because my clothes were secondhand? And do you know why that happened, Mom? Your father worked as hard as he could. I did too. We did the best we. It wasn't enough. It was never enough. And I swore that when I had the chance, I would never go through that again, that I would have everything that was denied to me. And now that I have it within reach, who appears? My own mother with her $1 million she doesn't even know what to do with, blocking my path. Finally, I saw it. Finally, I understood. All this time, I thought it was the money that had changed him. But no. The resentment had been there all along. The bitterness of a childhood he perceived as poor, as insufficient. Richard and I had given everything we had, but for Andrew, it had never been enough. Son, I said with a soft voice, almost broken, if we failed you, if we didn't give you what you needed, I'm sorry, but we did the best we could with what we had, and we loved you. We always loved you. Love doesn't pay for college. Love doesn't buy respect. Love doesn't give you power. No. But it gives you something money never will. Peace. And you, my son, you have no peace. I can see it in your eyes. You are empty inside, and no amount of money is going to fill that void. He went silent. For a moment, just a moment, I saw a crack in his armor. I saw the scared boy he once was. But then Valerie entered the room. Are you done talking? She asked with a sweet but firm tone, and the crack closed. Andrew put back on the cold mask he had learned to wear. Yes, he said. We're done. I stood up to leave. At the door, I stopped and turned. One last thing, Andrew. Your father loved you. Every day of his life he worked thinking of you, of your siblings. He sacrificed his health, his time, his life so you could have opportunities. And if he were here now, seeing what you have become, his heart would break. But he's not here, is he, Mom? I left that house knowing I had lost my son forever, that the Andrew I had known, if he ever existed, was gone, and in his place remained a stranger with his face, with his voice, but without his soul. I drove back home in the rain that had finally begun to fall. The sky cried the tears I could no longer shed. But when I arrived and saw Thomas and Lucy waiting at my door, worried, loving, I knew something fundamental. I had lost one son, but I still had two, and they were worth all the pain in the world. That night, while reviewing the recording of the conversation with Andrew, I heard something I had missed in the moment. At the very end, when I was leaving, he had whispered something so low it was barely audible. "Forgive me, Mom." So quiet that perhaps even he didn't realize he had said it. And in that almost inaudible whisper, I found the truth I had been seeking all this time. That whisper became my obsession over the following weeks. I listened to it again and again. "Forgive me, Mom." 3 words that meant somewhere, buried under layers of resentment and ambition, something of the boy I had loved still remained. But life doesn't stop while one looks for answers. The official investigation into the procedural fraud advanced. Patricia had testified formally, presenting all the evidence she had shown me. Other employees of Andrews began to speak too, now that someone had broken the silence. Frank called me one Tuesday morning with news. "Catherine, the district attorney is going to file formal charges against Andrew. Procedural fraud, forgery of documents. He could face up to 5 years in prison if found guilty." My heart squeezed. 5 years. My son in a cell for 5 years. "Is there any way to avoid it?" I asked with a weak voice. Could he reach a plea deal? Maybe. Restitution of the money he spent on the false lawsuit, community service, suspension of his law license for a time. But he would have to publicly admit what he did. And he would have to apologize. Do you think he will? Honestly, I don't know. The Andrew I met in that courtroom is too proud to admit defeat. But I knew another Andrew, the one who had whispered "forgive me" when he thought no one was listening, and I decided to do something that was perhaps crazy. I wrote him a letter by hand on the stationery I saved for special occasions. It took me all afternoon to find the right words. "Andrew, my son, I know we were never what you expected. I know our poverty embarrassed you, that our limits frustrated you, and I deeply regret if at any moment we made you feel you weren't enough, just as you were. But you need to understand something fundamental. The money you crave so much isn't going to fill the void you feel. There is still time, son. You can still choose who you want to be. Your father is watching you from wherever he is. And I, despite everything, am still your mother. And mothers never stop loving, even when love hurts so much you think it's going to kill you. The door to my house will always be open for you, but you have to walk through it as the man you really are, not the mask you have learned to wear. With eternal love, Mom." I sent it by certified mail to his office. I didn't expect an answer. I just needed him to know there was still a way back if he wanted to take it. 3 weeks passed with no news. Then, one morning, Frank called me urgently. "Catherine, you need to come to my office. Now. Something has happened." I arrived in 30 minutes. Frank was at his desk with several documents in front of him and a grave expression. "Sit down," he said. "This is going to be shocking." I sat, my heart beating fast. The investigation discovered something that changes everything. Something Andrew deliberately hid when he acted as executor of your Uncle August's will. What thing? The will that was read in that meeting was legitimate. The amounts, the distributions, everything was correct, but there were additional documents attached to the will. Documents that Andrew, as executor, had the legal obligation to present and never did. He passed me a thick folder. These are the documents Patricia found in Andrew's digital archives. They are Uncle August's complete instructions on how the inheritance was to be handled. I opened the folder. The first document was a long letter from Uncle August addressed to his heirs. "Dear nephews, I leave you this fortune not as an end, but as a means. During my life, I worked hard and accumulated wealth, but I realized too late that money without purpose is just paper. Therefore, I established the following conditions for this inheritance. The $32 million I leave you must be used as follows. $20 million will be designated to create the Richard Harrison Educational Foundation in honor of my deceased nephew. This foundation will grant full scholarships to students from low-income families. The remaining $12 million will be divided among you three, but with one condition. You must work together in the administration of the foundation for a minimum of 5 years, demonstrating you can honor your father's memory with family unity and community service. If anyone refuses to participate, they will lose their share, which will be redistributed between the other two. The additional $1 million for Catherine Harrison is unconditional in recognition of her character and dedication. I trust she will use it wisely. Tears began to fall down my face. Andrew knew this, I said with a trembling voice. Yes, confirmed Frank. As executor, he received all these documents from Uncle August's notary. He had the legal obligation to share them with all heirs. But he deliberately hid them. Why? Because if he presented the complete instructions, he wouldn't receive $10 million for himself alone. He would receive only $4 million, and he would have to dedicate 5 years of his life to working in a foundation for poor families, exactly the kind of life he had spent decades trying to leave behind. He showed me more documents. There's more. Here are emails between Andrew and Uncle August from 2 years ago, when the uncle was still alive. Andrew wrote to him several times asking to be named executor of the will. He told him he was the only one with enough legal experience to handle such a large estate. I read the emails with growing horror. Andrew had cultivated a relationship with the uncle specifically to position himself as executor. He had been strategic, calculating, patient. Did Uncle August suspect anything? I asked. Look at this last letter. Frank passed me a yellowed envelope. He wrote it a week before dying and left it sealed with instructions that it only be opened if problems arose with the execution of the will. I opened the envelope with trembling hands. Uncle August's handwriting was shaky but clear. If you are reading this, it is because something went wrong with my will. I suspect that Andrew, whom I named executor for his legal experience, might try to manipulate my instructions. He is an ambitious young man, and ambition without values is dangerous. That is why I left copies of all documents with my personal attorney and the notary. If Andrew hides anything, find them. My true will was to create a foundation that honored not wealth, but character, like the character of Richard, who worked his whole life with dignity, and like the character of Catherine, who loved without conditions. Let this money serve to create more people like them, not to feed greed. I covered my face with my hands. Uncle August had known. He had seen in Andrew exactly what I had refused to see for so long. Catherine, Frank said softly, this is probate fraud. It's a serious federal crime. Andrew didn't just hide information. As executor, he held a position of trust that he violated deliberately. He could face 10 years in prison, not 5. And what happens to the inheritance now? Now it gets executed according to Uncle August's true instructions. The foundation will be created. The $20 million goes there. The other $12 million will be divided among the 3 siblings, but only if they accept working at the foundation. If Andrew refuses or is found criminally guilty, his share divides between Lucy and Thomas. And my $1 million? Your $1 million was unconditional. It is completely yours, no matter what happens with the rest. I remained silent, processing everything. My son had known from the beginning that the inheritance came with responsibility, with service, with purpose, and instead of accepting it, he had tried to steal not just money, but the entire legacy his uncle wanted to leave. There's more, Frank continued. Investigators found that Andrew had already spent almost $2 million of his share of the inheritance. He bought properties, made risky investments, lived beyond his means, assuming the money would keep flowing. What is going to happen now? The DA wants Andrew to pay back everything he spent. If he can't, he'll have to liquidate his assets. And he will face criminal charges for probate fraud, on top of everything else. I called Thomas and Lucy. They came to Frank's office. When we showed them the documents, Lucy wept. All this time, we had the chance to do something meaningful, she said between sobs. Dad would have been so proud of a foundation in his name. And Andrew destroyed it all for greed. Thomas was pale with contained rage. How could you, Andrew? He whispered, as if his brother could hear him. How could you betray not just Mom, not just us, but Dad's memory? There is a hearing scheduled for next week, Frank explained. The judge will review all this new evidence, and the prosecutor will offer Andrew the chance to negotiate a plea deal or go to trial. That night I wrote in my journal, something I hadn't done since Richard died. I needed to put into words the pain I felt. Richard, my love, our son is lost, and I don't know if it was our fault for not seeing the signs, or if this was simply how it was destined to be. But your Uncle August saw what we didn't see and left a path to redemption, an opportunity to do good. I only hope Andrew has the courage to take it before it's too late. The week before the hearing was torture. Andrew didn't answer any of my calls. Valerie contacted me once to tell me with a cold voice that she was considering divorce. I didn't marry a criminal, she said before hanging up. The day of the hearing, the courtroom was packed. Journalists, curious onlookers, people who had followed the case on the news. The headline, "Successful Lawyer Defrauds Family Inheritance," had captured public attention. Andrew entered with his legal team. He looked destroyed. He had lost weight. His suit hung off him, but the most shocking thing was his eyes when he finally looked at me. There was no anger. There was no pride. There was only deep shame and pain. The judge reviewed the documents in silence for several minutes. Then he looked directly at Andrew. "Mr. Harrison, as executor of your uncle's will, you had a fiduciary responsibility not just to the heirs, but to the memory and final wishes of the deceased. By hiding essential documents, you violated that trust in the gravest way possible." Andrew stood up. "Your Honor, I have no excuses. What I did was unforgivable. I let my ambition, my pride, and my resentment turn me into someone I don't recognize. I am willing to accept any consequence." "Are you willing to formally confess?" asked the prosecutor. "Yes. To everything, and to do whatever is necessary to repair the damage." The judge nodded. "Then, I accept the proposed plea agreement. 3 years in prison followed by 5 years of probation, full restitution of embezzled funds, permanent suspension of your license to practice law, and mandatory participation in the Richard Harrison Educational Foundation once you serve your sentence, should the other administrators accept you." He banged the gavel. Andrew turned toward me. He walked slowly to where I was sitting. The bailiffs watched him, ready to intervene if necessary. He knelt in front of me and, with tears falling down his face, whispered loud enough for me to hear, "Forgive me, Mom. Uncle August saw what I couldn't see, that the real gift wasn't the money, but the opportunity to honor Dad, and I destroyed it all. I destroyed it because I was afraid of not being enough, of going back to being the poor kid with broken shoes. But in trying to escape that, I became something much worse. I put my hand on his head like when he was little and had nightmares. It's no longer about me forgiving you, son. It's about you learning to forgive yourself. And about honoring your father's memory the way he would have wanted, not with ill-gotten money, but with service, with humility, with love." The officers took him away. Lucy and Thomas came to hug me. We cried together, not just for the brother we had temporarily lost, but for the father who would never see what his legacy had provoked. But we also cried with hope, because Uncle August, in his wisdom, had left more than money. He had left a path of redemption, an opportunity to transform greed into generosity, resentment into service. And as we walked out of that court into the daylight, I knew that although the road would be long and painful, there was still hope for my son, because true love is never giving up. It is believing in the possibility of transformation, even when everything seems lost. And I, Catherine Harrison, mother of 3, widow of a good man, would never stop believing in that possibility. Never. A 1.5 years has passed since that day in the prosecutor's office. A 1.5 years of silence, reflection, and rebuilding. It wasn't easy. Healing never is. But sometimes the deepest wounds are the ones that teach us the most important lessons. Andrew served 8 months of his sentence before being transferred to a community work program for good behavior. I visited him twice during that time. We didn't talk much. We sat face to face in that cold visiting room, holding hands across the table, and that was enough. Sometimes silence says more than 1,000 words. The Richard Harrison Educational Foundation was officially established 6 months after the case was resolved. Thomas, Lucy, and I worked together on its creation. We decided it would grant full scholarships to students from low-income families who demonstrated not only academic excellence but also moral character and commitment to their communities. Lucy left her job in Chicago and moved back to run the foundation full-time. She had a gift for this, for seeing potential where others saw limitations. Thomas managed the finances with the prudence he had inherited from Richard, and I, at my 64 years, became the public face of the foundation. I gave talks at schools, spoke with parents, shared my story. At first, it terrified me. I wasn't a formally educated woman. I didn't have university degrees or impressive credentials. I only had my life, my experience, my pain turned into wisdom. But I discovered that was exactly what people needed to hear. Not academic theories about family values, but the raw, honest truth of a mother who had seen her son get lost in the darkness and fought to help him find the light again. At one of those talks, I met a woman named Eleanor. She was 58, 2 years younger than me. After my presentation, she approached with tears in her eyes. "My daughter hasn't spoken to me in 3 years," she confessed. "We argued over money, over inheritances, over things that now seem so insignificant. After listening to you today, I realized it's still not too late. That as long as there is life, there is hope for reconciliation." I hugged her, and in that hug, I understood something fundamental. My pain had served a purpose. My story, as devastating as it was, had the power to heal others, to give them hope when they had lost it. Andrew finally got out after completing his full-year sentence. He insisted on not asking for early release. "I need to pay what I owe," he told me during one of my visits. "Not for the law, but for myself." The day he got out, I was waiting for him outside with Thomas and Lucy. No banners or celebrations, just us, his family, telling him without words that he wasn't alone. We hugged in silence. This Andrew was different. Thinner, yes, but also softer. The edges of pride and ambition that had defined him had worn down, revealing the man who had always been underneath vulnerable, scared, but finally willing to be real. Valerie had filed for divorce while he was in prison. I don't judge her. She had married a version of Andrew that no longer existed. He signed the papers without a fight. "She deserves someone who can give her what I never could," he told me. "I can only offer her apologies." Andrew began working with the foundation as part of his community service. At first, it was awkward. Seeing his siblings run something he had tried to destroy was humiliating. But he swallowed his pride and showed up every day. He cleaned offices, organized files, did the work no one else wanted to do, and then something changed. They assigned him to work directly with the scholarship students, kids from poor families, exactly like he had been. Kids with worn shoes and secondhand clothes, but with fire in their eyes and dreams so big they didn't fit in their circumstances. One afternoon I found him in the foundation's garden talking to a 10-year-old boy named Michael. The boy was proudly showing him a drawing he had made, a picture of his family in a big, beautiful house. "Someday I'm going to buy that house for my mom," Michael was saying with absolute conviction. "I'm going to be a lawyer like you, and I'm going to earn a lot of money. And she's never going to have to worry about anything again." I saw Andrew's face transform. I saw how he saw himself in that child, and I saw the exact moment he understood something fundamental. Later, when Michael left, Andrew came over to me. "That kid is me 30 years ago," he said with a soft voice. "Full of ambition, of disguised resentment, of determination, and if someone doesn't help him understand that success without values is just a pretty form of failure, he's going to end up exactly where I ended up." "Then help him," I replied. "Teach him what you learned, but not with words, son, with actions, with example." And that was exactly what he did. Andrew became a mentor. Not the kind who gives lectures on moral principles, but the kind who sits with a kid to do homework, who teaches him it's okay to ask for help, who shows him that true strength is vulnerability, not the mask. The kids adored him because they saw in him not perfection, but redemption, and that is much more powerful. 3 months ago, at the Foundation's anniversary, Andrew gave his first public speech since his release. He spoke honestly about his mistakes, about the greed that had consumed him, about the pain he had caused, and he finished by saying something that made me weep with pride. "My father was a simple man who worked in a factory. My mother was a woman without formal education who sewed for others, and during my entire youth, I viewed them as insufficient. Now, after losing everything, I understand they had the only wealth that matters, integrity, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to honor that legacy I despised." The audience stood up. It wasn't an ovation for his eloquence, but for his honesty, for the courage to stand in front of everyone and admit his failure. Afterward, in private, he hugged me and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me, Mom. When I gave up on you, when I betrayed you in the worst way possible, you didn't betray me. You gave me consequences, yes, but you never stopped loving me. And that love was what finally saved me." "A mother's love has no conditions," I told him. "It can hurt us, it can break us, but it never dies. Because you are not just my children, you are pieces of my soul walking the world. And if a piece of your soul gets lost, you do whatever it takes to find it again." Today, as I write these last words of my story, I am sitting in my garden. The white roses have grown back. Thomas and Andrew replanted them together 6 months ago. They aren't the same roses Richard planted, but they are beautiful in a different way, stronger perhaps, because they were born from soil that knew destruction. My 3 children come to dinner every Sunday. It's our new tradition. We cook together, laugh together, sometimes cry together. We talk about Dad, about old times, about new dreams. There are no secrets between us anymore, no more masks. Andrew still has years of work ahead. Redemption isn't a destination, it's a path. But he is walking it with honesty, with humility, with an open heart. And that is all a mother can ask for. I have learned that money reveals who we really are. For some, it reveals generosity. For others, greed. But the most important thing I learned is that no matter what it reveals, there is always an opportunity to change, to choose to be better, to turn pain into purpose. If my story helps even a single mother to open her eyes, a single family to heal their wounds, a single lost son to find his way back, then every tear, every sleepless night, every torn rose will have been worth it. Because in the end, the only thing that really matters is love. The love you give, the love you receive, the love that sustains you when everything else collapses. And that love, unlike money, is the only inheritance truly worth leaving. Share this story with someone who needs hope, with someone going through their own darkness. Tell them they are not alone, that the dawn always comes, even after the longest night. And that true love, a mother's love, the love of family, is stronger than any betrayal, more valuable than any fortune, more enduring than any pain. Thank you for listening to me, for walking with me through this story I never wanted to live, but needed to tell. May God bless you, and may you never forget that as long as there is life, there is always hope for redemption.